Love is the law.
Love is the law. Love at your will.
All right. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. This is the monthly presentations from U.S. Grand Lodge's Education Committee. Oh, why, thank you. Like magic. Here's one. Tonight we are pleased to have Sister Harper Feist joining us. Sister Harper is a member of Ordo Templi Orientis. She is most recently the past master of Leaping Laughter Lodge in the Valley of Minneapolis, Minnesota. She is an ordained priestess of Ecclesia Gnostica Catholica, and she is also the current interviewer of U.S. Grand Lodge's official podcast, Laminal. So if you're listening to her talk tonight and you're like, man, she sounds so familiar, that might be where you heard her. She has a number of presentations under her belt, including The Poetry of Phyllis Seckler, History and Use of the Bornless Ritual, The Body as a Scrying Sensor, Pranayama, Women in Grimoire Magic, and a whole lot more. So we are pleased to have her this evening with us for The Body as a Scrying. Oh, whoa, I'm in all these. As a Scrying Sensor. So with no more from me, I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to you. And just a reminder for everybody to please keep your microphones on mute. And that's it. Again, thank you. And here you go.
Thanks so much, Brother Scott. It's a real pleasure to be here with you all this evening. I was musing while we were waiting how it's a little bit ironic that we're going to be talking about bodies and the use of bodies and kind of hopefully to use your body to get deeper into scrying, which is traditionally a visual art. And here we are in a teleconference setting. It's kind of funny. So I am going to hopefully present my slideshow here. All right. Let's see what we got. Can one of you with the camera on give me thumbs up that you see the body as a scrying sensor? Awesome. Thanks so much. So let's cram and jam. So my motivation here is that scrying is a thing that I do a lot of, or I have in the past done a lot of. I'll say more about that in a later point here. But a lot of people have asked me through the years, you know, how the hell do you do that, Harper? I have trouble with it. And I want to give you just a bite of my background. So bullet number 2, if a person as linear as I am can do this, then so can you. I'm a PhD scientist. I have a degree in physical chemistry. I spend all day, you know, doing math and writing in lines, and I can help you, I think. So I'd like to start out my presentation with a Thoreau quotation. The question is not what you look at, but what you see. It is only necessary to behold the least fact or phenomenon, however familiar, from a point a hair's breadth away from our habitual path or routine, to be overcome and enchanted by its beauty and significance. So that will give you an idea of where we're going here. What we're going to try to do is to look at things from a slightly different viewpoint. And then I would like to quote myself on the bottom here. If you want to pull a steering wheel, then rent a steering wheel puller. And basically what I'm saying here is that we need the right tools for the job. So let's talk about it. Here's my agenda for the next, you know, say 45, 50 minutes. I'm going to tell you a little bit about historical precedents. As you are all undoubtedly aware, people have been trying to establish contact with the invisible world for a real long time. Probably as long as there have been people, we have been trying to figure out what was that noise. What does God sound like? That, you know, that sort of thing. And for that reason, you can consider that scrying is a traditional practice. I will dig into definitional things real briefly in a bit. But a major part of this talk is going to be me trying to convince you that the world is weirder than you know. And the place that's going to start is a criticism of how your body works and of how your brain works. And the reason that I would do that is because I want you to have room for messages that don't necessarily fit with going to the grocery store and paying bills and, you know, even feeding your cat. I want you at the end of this talk to doubt what you believe is real. And certainly I want you to doubt what you remember. Further, it will never hurt you to be a better listener. So keep that in mind, right? People, you can invoke people too, and, you know, perhaps you should do that. I know. Yeah, further, we should all endeavor to make use of all the tools that we have. So let's dig in. So what do we mean when we talk about scrying? Traditionally, it is the act of looking in a reflective surface to obtain messages that are significant, or visions, omens, that sort of thing. Are you interacting with spirits, or are you interacting with your own psychology? That's not a fair question for this talk. Shame on you if you were thinking it. That is a different discussion for which you will need to provide me with a beer. Okay? So for the purpose of this talk, scrying is an imaginative trance with a focus and a purpose. The way this all starts is, you know, we have these magical events that we do to get the spirit present. And then you, as the person who is paying attention to the spirit, you will declare the images aloud, what, you know, however trivial or irrelevant they may seem. And we're going to talk about this way more at the end. I'll just leave you with that little tidbit. Of course, in ceremonial magic traditions, the scryer works in tandem with the conjurer. And as I kind of gave you a sense of foreshadowing, traditional scrying approaches are mostly visual. What you see with what you pretend you see with your eyes. But I maintain that the data that you get from your body helps you a whole lot, and it can basically help you establish connection with a larger universe. So I'm going to kind of dance through a little bit of historical precedence before we get into the meat of things. I would like to think that we're all familiar with the high priestess of the Temple of Apollo at Dolphin, you know, the classic oracle, the Pythia, in fact. Historically speaking, she had been doing this since about the 8th century BCE. A whole lot of authors have mentioned the oracle, including Aristotle, Clement, Diodorus, Euripides, Herodotus, you know, goes on forever. These authors have established oracular procedures largely from the 1st century BCE to the 4th century CE. And of course, none of them agree. They give conflicting stories about the preparations, about how people who came to the Adyton to receive an oracle were prepared, what their experiences were, kind of everything under the sun. But a couple of the factors that all of these authors have discussed match. And so those are here in the last 3 bullets. So the high priestess, since we're going to be talking a lot about preparation, that's going to be part of this historical discussion. So the priestess would take a sacred bath. She would say some prayers. She got involved with some incense. After the initial preparations, she would descend into the cave and mount a tripod seat, and she would hold a very large bowl of spring water into which she gazed to receive oracles from people who came and, to ask questions. Some of these people were emperors and kings. Some of these people were merchants. Some of these people were, young ladies who wanted to know who they were going to marry. All the standard questions. The priestess entered a frenzied state, possibly induced by vapors that arose from a chasm. Could have been ethylene. People argue about this a lot. And then she started to speak gibberish, and either the priests interpreted her gibberish and turned it into poems, or the priestess did that. Additionally, there are some interesting other, let's call it documentation from this time. The Greek magical papyri, actually there's a couple of rituals in there that are meant to develop scrying sensitivity through initiations to terrifying gods like Typhon, for example. But that all happened kind of 2nd to 3rd century CE, and so it's at least historically relevant to this period of time. So let's fast forward a whole lot of years to someone that we Thelemites have heard a lot about. So Sir Edward Kelly is probably historically the best known spirit medium. He worked with John Dee in a whole lot of various magical investigations, most of which involved angels. And so we could talk about the whole Enochian system and things like that. That's a whole nother discussion, and an incredibly rich tradition. But for now, let's just say that John Dee and Edward Kelly, they worked with angels. Their chief preparations for the spiritual conferences, let's call them, these actions were conducted with an air of intense Christian piety. Their preparations involved purification, prayer, and fasting. Now, to differ from the sorts of questions that must have been asked to the Pythia, Dee's purposes were almost universally political. What he wanted the angels to help him with was to heal the rift in Christendom, right? So remember that the English church had just fractured off, and there's Protestantism alive and roaring around on the continent. Also, the years noted above, these are the years of the discoveries of uncharted lands, up to and including the place most of us live now, the United States, North America in general. Kelly was the scryer. Kelly was an amazingly successful scryer by all accounts, but that's not the only thing he did. He was a forger. He got in trouble with the law to the point where they nipped his ears off. And further, he was a little bit skeevy with his alchemical pursuits, in that he told Rudolph of Prague that he could turn lead into gold. Rudolph said, well, why don't you come and do that at my house? It took Kelly too long. Rudolph threw him in jail. And then when he tried to leave, he fell out of a tower, breaking his leg, and died. Okay, now we're going to roll forward a whole bunch more years to another friend of the Thelemites on the call, Eliphas Levi, who summoned the spirit of another favorite of Thelemites, Apollonius of Tyana. I'm going to actually read a little piece here, so you can stare at the bushy visage of Eliphas while I tell you what happened when he did this. His first attempt at practicing necromancy came during a trip to London in 1854. A mysterious woman claiming to be an adept asked him to conjure the spirit of Apollonius of Tyana, a great ancient magician. Gnostic saint, by the way. Agreeing to try the conjuration, Levy went about his preparations, which included 2 weeks on a vegetarian diet, a week of fasting, which included meditation about Apollonius, and imagining having conversations with him. When he felt himself ready for the ritual, he donned white robes and entered his magical chamber that had mirrored walls. You can tell this is going to get creepy, right? He placed a table covered with white lambskin in the center of the room. On the table, he placed 2 metal bowls in which he lit fires. He began his incantation, which lasted for 12 hours. Probably got dry. Levy gave a description of the ritual. He progressively got colder as he proceeded deeper into the ritual. After some 12 hours, the floor beneath him began to shake. He saw an apparition in one of the mirrors. He asked the ghost to appear. On the 3rd request, a grayish spirit appeared in front of him, thin and sad, and wrapped from head to foot in a gray shroud. Levy was frightened and felt extremely cold. The apparition touched Levy's ritual sword, causing his arm to suddenly go numb. Levy dropped the sword and lost consciousness. So, yeah, so that's a successful invocation. But I think one of the reasons that I chose this example is because, you know, a possible lesson for us is look at all of the work he went through to actually get to the point where he could scare the pants off himself, or perhaps have the pants scared off him. Now, more is better sometimes because it clearly draws the practitioner further into the operation, right? I think we can all agree on that. So let's compare these 3 examples with traditional Solomonic ceremonial magic scrying. So I imagine lots of us are pretty familiar with this. So 2 operators, typically, you know, like I was saying earlier, the conjurer and the scryer. In these operations, when they first began to be performed, the scryer was generally a young boy. The idea there was to have an innocent, a pure innocent, be the person who typically interacted with the spirit. The spirit was conjured into a crystal, and maybe you can see my my cursor here. But the crystal or the mirror or the bowl was placed in a triangle as an act of protection against possession. So the operators would stand in the circle of protection, and the boogeyman would be in the triangle. Now, all of ceremonial magic, up until really recently, I suppose, it's a Christian activity, and the Christian practitioners needed protection against demonic entities. So they would call the spirit into the crystal, and then they would question. I always have helpers. Then they would question the spirit to make sure that it was the right one. You know, is this your seal? What's your name? Then they would ask the spirit questions and compare it with the spirit catalog. So make sure that, you know, it's kind of like a party line. So am I really talking to the person I want to talk to? Okay, good. Now, so all of the previous examples that we've talked about have been largely visual, right? But that's not the only way to do this. So in traditional African religion, there's a whole kind of other approach to this, and it's the use of the body for the spirit to inhabit. Now, I know less about this than I do the previous examples, which I've actually performed myself. But what is seen here is that the spirit, the loa, are invoked, kind of the same as in Western esotericism, only they are encouraged to take part in the service. They receive offerings, they grant requests, but they do that from the viewpoint of being inside a ritualist who is said to have been ridden. Now, the people who are possessed in this sort of ritual exhibit personality changes, extreme strength. They may speak languages that they don't know ordinarily. And additionally, they may not recall much of what happened. The horses are also occasionally seen to exhibit clairvoyance. So in this case, different than the last one, possession is a sought after experience. And this isn't unique to ATRs, but also exists in another form in the Greek magical papyri, where hail, the spirit who enters into me, convulses me, and leaves me kindly according to the will of God. So the kind of post-Alexandrian world was also involved in this sort of extremely close-up view of the spirits, as we could say. So modern day witches have kind of developed a midpoint to all this, and they call it aspecting. I'm going to call it partial possession. I'm not sure exactly what else to call it, but let's call it partial possession, practiced by, at least to my knowledge, the reclaiming a tradition of witchcraft. And this trance, it's geared toward connection with the deity. In this tradition, physical sensations are used to deepen the connection. The practitioners will often comment upon, I feel hot, my shoulders feel, there's pressure on my shoulders. And then, and this is a hard part actually, you have to attempt to speak for the deity. And there's kind of this recognition and, oh my God, that's hard. And you'll hear people say, well, I hate my voice and I can't do it. And then in the end, oftentimes it works out fine. And in comparison with the other examples that I've given, it's also done in pairs. There's a person who is partially possessed, and then there is someone to keep them out of trouble while they're partially possessed, the wrangler. All right, so we're going to pause here for a sec, and we're going to recap. Scrying is a traditional spiritual practice. Most cultures, most religions have some version of this. And I would say, here you are, you want to hear, my opinions about this. So it is part of our human nature to seek connection with deity, spirits, titans, the larger reality. And further, I think that we'll all agree that it involves a particular frame of mind that is not the same one that you pay your bills with. Typically, the word scrying refers to the non-possession form of the art. But what I hope to prove to you, let's say, is that physical sensory information is really useful and relevant. And also historically noted, if you read the book that describes the Abramelin ritual, the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel is inevitably associated with a smell. And of course, we've all watched enough horror movies to know that hauntings, thermal sensations are really common in hauntings. So hold that in your mind while we go through the rest of this. Certainly, I'm going to try to convince you that physical sensations can be used to begin, sustain, and deepen a trance. And perhaps it contains other information about the experience. So now we're going to talk about your body, about the hardware. This is where my history as a scientist really sticks out. So I apologize. At the same time, I hope you really like this. So since scrying is largely a visual thing, let's talk about the functioning of your eyes. So on the upper left-hand corner, you see a hand wrapped around the sun. This is an image taken by a camera. That camera has an exposure time that's much shorter than your eyes can manifest. So the camera is undamaged, whereas your eye would be damaged. The lower left picture is an X-ray vision of the sun. You can't see X-rays, but scientists look at the sun in terms with special X-ray cameras because it shows features that you can't see with the naked eye. Same on the lower right-hand picture. This is an infrared, camera image of the sun. You can't see those features in the sun without instrumentation. The upper right-hand box, it could be one of two things. I forget. It could be a picture of Pluto as seen from Earth, or it could just be a black box. Who would know? So without really belaboring this, in engineering language, our sensor system has what we could say were severe performance limitations. So, and in fact, these performance limitations are kind of inherent in the way that we talk about our senses, right? So we say that we see visible light, but visible light is this tiny part of the electromagnetic spectrum. People who measure such things, it's from 400 to 700 nanometers. And the rest of it, although it's there, I just was telling you about it, but you can't see it without instrumentation. That doesn't mean it's not there. So to move through the senses here, you're aware that as sensitive as you think your skin is, a horse can feel a mosquito land on its skin through hair. And as wonderful as it is to smell someone's perfume, a dog can smell cancer and COVID, and there's still no better way to find explosives, period. Your ears, they work really well when you're a young person, but as you age, the high frequencies, they just go away. And in point of fact, you can actually use a high frequency generator as a teenager repellent. That happens in some stores, I believe. So there's a whole lot more information that's really fun to talk about here, but let's leave it at that. So given these performance limitations, do you think that you experience reality with your senses? Not all of it, certainly. Some little piece. So you do pretty well with some tiny little piece. And so given that, I want you to consider for the next couple days, what is actually real, given that you're seeing some tiny portion of what's actually going on. And then there's the fact that my eyes are slightly different than yours. And so there's a bullet up here that says the brown couch. So when I lived in Colorado with my son who was in high school, we had a couch. And he said, "Mom, that couch is purple like an eggplant." And I said, "No, Ian, it's brown like a chocolate chip." So what is real? And then there are pieces of the universe that you're aware of or that you're exposed to every day that you are not aware of. So I'm going to tell you about one of these, and it's a vibrational source that we're going to call infrasound. And you're aware of infrasound because you know that animals flee areas impacted with severe weather before it happens, right? Before a tsunami, all the critters run away, and unfortunately, the people are not sensible enough to follow the animals usually. So sounds that are sounds, right? These are actually vibrations that are lower frequency than can be heard with ears, are actually detected by other anatomical structures, eyeballs and organs and things like that. And so the sources of these infrasound signals are avalanches and earthquakes and distant explosions, engines, things like that. And strangely, in the mid-1980s, there was a kind of fringe group of scientific papers that got published that stated growing evidence that infrasound might cause feelings of fear in people. And one of the chief proponents of this kind of literature was this guy who discovered that detuned HVAC systems actually put out vibrations right around here, 18 or 20 hertz. And he noticed that, there were feelings of fear. He thought he saw figures, just a little bit like Eliphas Levi, gray figures in his peripheral vision. So, people don't have structures in their body for no reason. We are infrasound detectors in some ways. So clearly, we have the ability to sense these vibrations, but maybe not as well as other animals. And then really briefly, there are senses in the animal kingdom that we lack entirely, including electroreception, echolocation, thermal detection of prey, the detection of fire at range. This is probably actually a carbon dioxide detector, really. And then animals that navigate with help through magnetic fields. Okay, so I have just insulted the hell out of the hardware that represents your senses. And now I'm going to tell you that your perception and your memory are also really slippery. So before you think too much about it, the paradigm of photographic memory seems logical, right? That you can look at something and remember it like a camera. But I've just finished telling you that we're not cameras. And from a certain point, it would be ridiculous even to think about this from a digital memory standpoint, right? It's just too much information to store or process or anything like that. So an example of how easily human memory is confused is shown on the left-hand side of our slide here. So you have 3 pictures over here. And in the top picture, a test subject, this guy who's wearing the short sleeve shirt, investigators, they stop him and they ask him for some directions. And in the middle of him telling the guy in the dark t-shirt where the library is, some people walk in between them with a door. And then while the door is in the way, you see what happens, right? They substitute another person. And it turns out that lots and lots of people who are tested in this manner, they don't notice the switch, right? You're thinking to yourself, oh, I totally would have noticed, but you know what? Maybe I wouldn't have. And here's the thing too, when you think you're remembering something really vividly, you assume that's because you're recalling it correctly, right? We all think that. Something is really bright in your memory, it's because it's real. But memory changes over time, and researchers are clearer and clearer about this, that it changes over time, and you become more and more certain about this when, of course, it doesn't become better over time. And, just as a side comment, this has huge consequences for the world at large. And it turns out that eyewitness misidentifications contribute to 72% of wrongful convictions in the US that are later overturned with DNA evidence. So your perception is not what you think it is, and your memory is really slippery. And why is that? So the world seems so complete. You're walking down the street and you don't you know your eyes are bouncing, but your vision doesn't bounce, right? So why is that? So your head is really good at sampling and interpolating all that. And okay, I know this is getting heavy here. I'm almost done. And we're not aware of the things we're not aware of, right? So we have a system that doesn't collect the data that you think it's collecting. You're not processing it the way you think you are. And it's all in the name of efficiency. However, I will say that our ability to focus when we want to, or maybe after we do all the exercises in Libre E, we're really good at paying attention and ignoring distractions. And so this is where we're going to get into the scrying, the official scrying portion of the talk. All right, so one more recap. The world, so I insulted your senses and I insulted the way you think about things. I insulted your memory, but on the other hand, the world is a whole lot richer than you sense. And what you're actually experiencing is incomplete. And that all makes sense because your brain and your body are meant to keep you alive and perpetuate the species, and not actually do Google meetings and not actually probably drive cars and things like that. But I wanted to bring all of this stuff into question because it allows you to kind of worry about what happens at the very edge of your sensory gear. And the use of your intellect in this way, right, to create questions about how you function, it will increase your bandwidth when you scry. And so when you sit down as the scryer and the conjurer calls the spirit into the room and something happens, right, and your head says, oh shit, that can't be real, you can shut it down because there is a question in your mind now that the world is a weird place. And so with that in mind, right, with your head open to the notion that you don't know everything and you can't predict it all, you can use your body to set up the encounter and maintain it. Okay, now let's get into it. So in all of the examples that I gave, there are safety protocols, right? The Pythia had the priest. The priest made sure that the Pythia came out of her trance. The priest made sure that people who came to ask questions were okay. John Dee and Edward Kelly had one another, and Eliphas Levi, he wished he had a friend, maybe, let's say. So there are safety aspects to all of this. And I'm not going to tell you how to do this because, look at all the brilliant people on this call. You each have your own view of what you want to do with the scrying information. You each have your own tradition. And you each have a different view of what you're protecting yourself from and what exposure, might do to you. So get out the banishings and the protective prayers and make a circle with a wand to protect yourself and set wards and enlist helpers. Make a magic circle, make sure you have the right spirit, and also form a leave to depart is a good deal, right? And go home, come back later. It's important. And so when you do classic ceremonial magic, the Christian God is the boss at all these things. And so the Key of Solomon, lots and lots of prayers to protect yourself from frightening things. So now we're going to talk about getting ready. And I will say the point of all of this preparation is just to arrange the mind of the practitioner. And here's Key of Solomon ceremonial preparation. Ain't nobody got time for this. So we're going to do something else. So we've talked a little bit about the Pythias preparation, Dean Kelly, Eliphas Levy. His preparation involved diet and interior design. And I really liked that he set himself up beforehand, kind of imagining what it would be like to talk about, to talk with the spirit. That is a super useful thing to do. Anything that will make your rational mind be a little bit less loud, including kind of questioning reality and your own manifestations of that. I will say that my personal practice is kind of two-step. The first step of my preparation is bathing, fasting, and sleep deprivation. I also I like the Te Deum from the Lutheran Red Hymnal as a way to kind of create this empty space. Psalm 51 is great too, if you're into the Christian thing. That's where, that's the origin of the purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean, wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. Also good. And the second step then is a creation of this feeling of holiness. And in the times when I have worked with exorcists, we've actually incorporated a step that calls the seer after the spirit. So there are pieces in the Key of Solomon where it's the incense, inanimate creature of God, the kind of the incense is invoked, the use of the incense is invoked, but you can also actually call the scryer with a hypnotic element, and perhaps the words, animate creature of God. So this is a consecration of the seer. In my class, which I'll talk about later, many of the students, when we did this sort of exercise, they felt like a child when they went into scry, and so children are receptive and curious, and this is the point where this is the say goal for your external preparations before you start working with the spirit. So all of this stuff is going to be much harder if you're tense. And when I gave this talk at NOTOCON it was 2017 already. I actually gave a little meditation for people to show that if you can relax your core muscles, and I'm referring to all the muscles between your nipples and knees, just because that's easy to remember, that will remove all of the tension from your face and your arms and legs too. So when you guys think about this later, think about relaxing all of those muscles as you enter the temple, as you sit in front of the altar, as the conjurer is actually calling the spirit. Remove all the tension out of those muscles. And further, right, check on this for yourself. If you think you have all the tension out of those muscles, tense them all up one last time and relax them. And you'll have to actually, on purpose, pay attention to this while you're trying to establish contact with the spirit, because all these muscles, they love to activate. And the old phrase tight ass, it belongs in here somewhere, I'm sure. So these guys, they activate without you paying any attention. So keep like a quarter of your mind on that while you're waiting for things to start in the temple. So I see we're sort of running out of time. I have just a few more slides, so hold with me, okay? Hold with me. So a couple of other helpers. I'm not sure how kind of what the general public's experience is like with psychedelics, but when you have taken a psychedelic, the sort of principle, thank you, Scott. The principal thing that happens is that, your vision gets kind of confused. You see walls breathe, kind of everybody's favorite description of an LSD trip. And so you could say that the experience of psychedelics involves confusion of all these sensors that we just talked about. And then also there's usually a sense of time getting messed up, right? A dilation or a contraction. And it really throws you into a non-ordinary experience. And in the case of the psychedelic experience, well, okay, it's due to physical factors. You've taken a pharmaceutical that's doing a thing in your body, and it's changing your experience. But you can actually fake this by inducing this visual confusion, and I will explain how that's possible. So if you pile lots of things that have mirrored surfaces on one another, like this, this is actually a silvered bowl on top of a mirror. So the kind of mirrors at the bottom, and you can see that the black dot in the middle is me with a camera, a real camera, and not just a cell phone, proving that the slide is old. But if you stare at this sort of thing, a big pile of mirrored irregular surfaces, and you listen to music that's just a tiny bit too loud, you can actually force yourself to have a trip. And I would urge you to try this because firstly, it's beautiful. You can set up your altar to call a spirit into the bowl. You can set up the bowl to contain other elements of the ritual, and then you can put yourself into a non-normal reality this way really easily, and you don't have to find a dealer. Did I say that? So this let's spend some time with this list. So a lot of the things that I've said are here. So we're going to put the whole scrying experience together. The pre-ritual ritual, this bathing, the bathing thing, the mantra thing, the singing thing. It will. I think everybody is going to have some version of this that's unique to themselves. So tweak it slowly over time to optimize it for yourself, and don't rush. You're not going to have the perfect experience the first time. Well, if you do, write me an email. Okay. Then, right, while you're doing your pre-ritual ritual, let the conjurer set the temple up. Let the conjurer get a piece of paper, a tape recorder, light the candles, whatever else, and then make sure that there's a place for you to sit that's comfy. Go in. Again, don't rush, and set up the altar to help you succeed. And so this business of the visual confusion is all about that, right? So set up the altar with statuary, with other memory linked items that will help you not get stuck in the middle of the ritual thinking of what kind of pizza you're going to have for dinner. Okay. And during the ritual, constantly check in with your body to deal with the tension that I was describing, but also it will allow you to sense the spirit. When the spirit comes in, the relaxed state will keep you from being frightened. Trust me, being frightened is actually kind of fun, but it keeps you from doing your job. So allow, and then once the spirit's there, once you feel, when I say the spirit's there, once you feel something, allow yourself to talk about it. So For example, the chair is hard. The cat won't be quiet. It's hot. My ear is cold. I feel a pressure on my shoulders. They feel like hands. My stomach is cold. And so, like I say in the bullet, the stream of consciousness statements about your body can pop you right into a scrying trance, right? So you start out talking about, you know, my robe is bunched up under my butt, and then you are talking about your physical state, and then you are talking about, I hear something, then you can see something crazy in your peripheral vision. That's the scrying trance. It moves from ordinary stuff to things that can be really weird. Okay, so you're going to ride the whole thing through. The conjurer hopefully has the presence of mind to write down what you say, because you won't remember likely. And then when it's over, right, the conjurer will tell the spirit, you know, so long and thanks for all the fish, and send him home. And after the license, right, after license to depart, that's what that means. People argue about this. So, you know, do what you feel is right. I always eat or drink the offering so that the spirit can use my body to enjoy it. Other people put it on the ground outside. Still other people feed it to the inevitable cat. But it's got to go somewhere to be enjoyed by the spirit. And don't rush here either, right? Enjoy the feeling of having had this experience. Stay in the temple, eat something normal, do the lesser ritual of the pentagram if it be your will, that kind of thing. So especially if you have questions about this, go ahead and put them in the chat window. I realize I spent a lot of time making you question reality, which is what I wanted to do. And now we're rushing through the trance stuff at the end. This is as it should be. But ask questions, of course. And now, so some things about being in quarantine. Now, I'm having a hell of a time doing this kind of work without kind of other stimulation to provide a contrast, I think. When you take a spiritual retreat, you retreat from something. We can't do that anymore. And so I want to say that if you're having trouble doing ritual or magic or any of these things right now, be nice to yourself. At some point, this will be over. My recommendations to you to kind of get yourself, you know, rocked off top dead center, try some new things, cook some new food, play some new games, whatever, do anything new, just to provide a contrast from what we're talking about. And then, of course, you know, keep in touch with each other, you wonderful folks. And one last slide. I do teach a class on this, and I can provide contact information. Thanks so much to Brother Scott and USGL for allowing me to talk to you today. I want to also thank my magical partner for many years, Josh Gadbois, my first invisible friends who are from the Theurgia Goetia, Ushel and Ansoel. They probably wonder where I am, actually. And thanks to you. And if you put questions in the chat window, I will attempt to answer them. Thank you very much.
Wow. Well, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for it. Let's get into Q&A. All right. It's already going.
Cool.
First off, yeah, I mean, I could read them, or
all right,
we can just go in order.
Let me see what we got here. Let me rearrange some things. Okie dokie. Oh, there's lots of nice howdies. Howdy, everyone. Is any posture okay? Zero gravity. Oh, wow, that would be cool. Astro Rose, that's brilliant. Any posture is fine. You're going to sit there for a while. You want to be comfortable, but you don't want to get dozy. I sit in sort of classical Japanese martial art seiza, and my feet will fall asleep. And Scott knows all about this, right? When you sit in seiza for a long time, your feet become rubber. And actually that has become, to me, part of the actual trance. Your mileage may vary. Try. So this is an experimental thing. So try anything. And Astra, if you do zero gravity, I compel you to tell us what happens. Now, and doing it alone, well, it's certainly easier with a travel buddy. I personally don't find any of this to be dangerous. I've had experiences that were intense. I've had experiences that were a little shocking, but I've never felt like I was in danger. That having been said, if you have a buddy, you don't have to write anything down. It's really awesome to have a conjurer set up the temple for you. So, either way, I think it's safe, but it's real nice if you have someone to work with. Oh yeah, Cameron. Oh, quarantine stuff. Yeah, I'm having a whole lot of trouble doing this stuff right now. And I think it's a contrast thing. And so if you think it's a contrast thing too, then go out and do something new, like learn to cross country ski, maybe. I don't know. Jose, thank you for attending. Sharif, good. Yeah, come in and be in class with me. Oh, Julie. So my kiddo, I want to say my kiddo was in middle school when I started actively doing this. He's graduating from college now. So I think performing ritual is fine with kids. There are rituals that you want to do with children, right? I mean, you want to. I would venture to say that we all want to share what our own traditions, our own developing traditions with our families and our kids, if it's possible. And so I would say performing rituals with little kids, offerings, fabulous, devotional stuff, beautiful. Probably might be weird to have kids in actual conjurations with spirits, just because they're sort of distracting and distractible. If I had a young person around now, I might be tempted to ask them to scry for me, actually. Oh yeah, okay, Vanessa. We tell her, I have a daughter, we tell her we're going to meditate. We do ritual in the other room. Yeah, totally. That's a perfect way to do things. Oh, and Astra, we have phones to record. Yes, of course. All right. Got some thanks here. Jay Brown, awesome to have you. Okay, Fred, good night. Fred, we loved your little kitty picture. And Cameron, any particular advice about getting more comfortable with spirit interactions? Yeah, you just have to do it. You know, it's practice. It's an experimental hobby, if you will. And what? Oh, you've said I've never had an interaction with grimoire spirits that weren't initially terrifying, and so far I have not got used to it. So why don't you invoke some angels, maybe, or Theurgia Goetia spirits that aren't quite so inherently frightening? You know, it kind of gear these first experiments to you know, something that's not inherently scary to you. Oh, yeah, the cub. I want to hear about that, Sora Gimel. Yes. We want to know if the cub is a good seer. Oh, and Sarah, oh, thank you for being here. We have recorded the obviously we're recording this, and it will be available to watch later. And I think that's all the questions. I want to thank you all for being here. I'm an easy person to find on Facebook if you turn out to have questions later or comments, or if you have anything funny to say about me trying to make you doubt reality, come and find me. It would be great. I love is a law, love under will. I think we're done.
Well, Sister Harper, thank you so much for everything tonight. And I really appreciate it. I know everybody here really appreciated it. Again, if you want to watch this over and over and over and over, just hopefully in the not too distant future on the YouTube page of U.S. Grand Lodge of OTO, we'll have this up. Next month, we will have a presentation from Felicia Heydrich. We'll have information on our education committee page about that. As always, we have our public events calendar. So if you're sitting around at home and you want to try to find something very cool to look at for a little while, just go to that and you'll find everything on there. Man, it's been so great. This presentation tonight was so amazing, and I can't thank you enough. And thank you to everybody who tuned in. Yeah, any closing thoughts?
I just have a bunch of thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, so great. All right, everyone, thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you again another time soon. Harper, thank you again, and hopefully we'll be back in the dojo before too long.
I hope so.
Keep working that Seiza. All right.
Exactly.
93, everybody.
93.